Good morning, everyone. Welcome to week 5. Today's tutorial is going to be mostly covering Excel stuff, but if you are using Google Sheets, I'll try to let everyone know if there's any differences, so you should be able to follow along in both. Today's tutorial, I've called it Preparing Your Data and Best Practices. So the idea of this tutorial is that we have sources of data that are both good and bad, and we're trying to make that data usable and then start using it. So I'm going to start off with a bit of a refresher, and you might be familiar with it, but then we're going to ramp up into the fun stuff. In this example, I'll be showing you cell references, array references, we'll be talking about relative and absolute references, and also how to reference stuff from other sheets. And hopefully by the end of it, I'll be able to show you a few reasons of why all of that's useful. Alright, let's get started. There's a couple of basics I want to show you guys first, and for that I'm using data that's pulled from the Bureau of Meteorology. This is the daily rainfall from Observatory Hill, and I've got the data from year to date, and I've downloaded that through a zip. You don't need to worry about that. This is just for an example. And I've already got the data open in Excel. Alright, now one of the first things I wanted to cover, and you've probably seen this before, but we'll just ramp up as we go, is cell references. So what a cell reference does is it looks inside a cell and grabs the value from there. So a cell is a column, so let's take F for example, and a row, let's say 5, and over here I'm going to type equals F5. As you can see, that's highlighted for me, and when I hit enter it will pull that data across. Now see, if this data changes to say 2.5, you'll see the changes reflected over here. Change that back. Now let's see what happens when I hover over this corner bit. I've got the little cross cursor, drag it down, and it's grabbed different cells. So this time it's F6, this time it's F7, this time it's F8, and that is because this cell, relative to this cell, has increased 1, 2, 3 times. So as you can see, this 6 is replicated here, and likewise this 5.4 is here. And the distance from here to here should be the same as the distance from here to here. We can stop that from happening. All we got to do is put a little $sign. Trying to find my $sign. So I put a $sign there before the 5, and that says I always want this to be 5. Now let's see what happens when I drag it. They're all pointing to the same cell. Similarly, if I drag this across, what you'll see is that the data now pulling from H5 and G5, which is columns G and H. And likewise, I can lock that in place by saying $sign. And when I drag this across, I've got an absolute reference rather than a relative reference. Little shortcut for that. If you're up here in the formula box, you can hit F4 on your keyboard and it will cycle through various forms of relative and absolute references. Alright, next thing I wanted to do is an array reference. So if I wanted to grab, say, the first 7 days of rainfall, I know that this starts at F2 and ends at F8. I can type equals F2 and then the semicolon to F8. And as you can see, that was already highlighted, and the data should be there again. Similarly, as if I dragged it down. But the difference is, if I delete this, as you can see, it doesn't disappear because it's all populated from this cell up here. It'll stay there until I delete this cell, or the contents of this cell. And array references can also go in 2 dimensions. So let's say I wanted to get the month and day, so I could get D2 through to D8, and I'll show you another way to select those cells. I can just hit equals and then select them, and as you can see it's filled it up D2 to F8, and it will fill a two-dimensional array. And the same thing will happen if I try to delete any of these, it'll stay there. And if I change any of these, the changes will be replicated across, but we don't want to change those, so we'll leave those as is. We can also reference entire rows and columns. Let's say, for example, I wanted to copy this entire row, for example. Let's go equals, and I do F to F. And I'm not specifying any numbers, and as you can see, it's highlighted this whole column, and that'll just keep going. I could scroll on, and it will actually hit the bottom of the table. Hit enter, and it's filled up the whole array. See here that these cells, while they're empty over here, have actually populated with 0. And if I try to do the same thing in one cell below, I'd probably get what's called a spill error. And that's where the information that I'm trying to paste isn't going to fit, because this one's one cell down. The amount of cells selected in this column is one less if I try to paste it from here below. And I can do the same thing with rows, and you probably guessed how I do it. Let me go down to the bottom so I've got some clear space to do it. I can hit equals, and I'll show you the quick way that works for grabbing columns or rows. So I can just select it on the edge there, and it says 78 to 78, and it hasn't specified any columns. As you can see, it's copied over. Right, now you can also reference from another sheet entirely. So let me just set up a new sheet by clicking the little plus down here. And let me just rename this so I don't have to type this all in. I'm going to call this raw data. Now, if I was to grab our favorite cell over here, F2, I could go equals, and then I type raw data, and put an exclamation mark, then F2. As you can see, it's 4.2. And that any changes here will be replicated as well. So I'll change it to 5 and you'll see that. It's 5 over here now. Control Z to change that back. Now I'd also like to show you that copy pasting relative addresses also works. So let's do Control C on this cell, and I'll paste it down here. And what you can see that's happened is the same thing as if I drag this down. Let me drag it into there, and you can see it's replaced it with the same thing. When I copy pasted, it looked at it as if I wanted to change this to a 6 because I'm pasting it 4 cells down. And absolute referencing works here too. I can say $F $2. Now, if I copy and paste this, no matter where I paste it, I'll get an absolute reference. Now the reason why I got this data is because it's been very wet in Sydney lately, and I wanted to show you how we can use these tools to do a rolling average. So a rolling average works out the average over the past, in our case, 7 days. So we care about the last week's worth of rain. I'm going to start at the bottom because today's date that I pulled this data is the 24th. Now I'm going to go equals, and I'll start off slowly because I think the best way to work in Excel is to do things piece by piece. So let's grab 7 cells. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can also see that little counter just up here. Sorry, I can't actually point to it, where it says 7R1C. That means I've selected 7 rows and 1 column. It's usually pretty handy if you're grabbing bigger amounts. That's 18 and 3. So I don't actually need to count those out. I can just have a look there. Alright, so that's those 7 7 previous days. Now I'll average this whole reference. And I've got the autocomplete. I can hit tab to select that one, and then close the brackets, and it should turn into the average for those 7 numbers. Now, because this is a relative reference, watch what happens when I drag this one cell up. Let's see what highlighted. So it's highlighted these 7, so it's not including the next day. Now that's really handy because that's the 7 days I want to average. Now, drag these all the way up here. And up until I run out of days, I've got a rolling 7-day average. Obviously you can't do a 7-day average if you don't have 7 days. So these will be having reference errors. That's fine. My intention is just to delete them. The reason why they're happening is because I've selected cells F1 to F7 here, which is also a problem because F1 doesn't contain any rain data, so that one also needs to be deleted. And trying to select a cell that doesn't exist or using relative references to select a cell that doesn't exist will cause an error. So I'll just go ahead and delete those. Alright, so now I've got my rolling average. And as you can see, as predicted, it was very wet over the last 7 days. Now something you might notice is that we have these little green triangles. That's Excel trying to tell us that we have some sort of error. It thinks we have an error, and it's giving us a warning. So if I go up the top and let it try to solve the error, keeping in mind what we have in the cell is F2 to F8, let's see what its fix is. And what it's done is it's selected the entire column. That's not what we want at all. It's trying to be helpful, but it's not. So I'm going to do a selection trick. I'm going to be holding Shift and the arrow keys to select multiple cells. Now if I hold Shift and Control, I can select the entire array of data. Now I'm going to click the little icon and say Ignore Error, just to get rid of the little triangles. Now I press Control and up, and I'm back up to the top. Let's give this a title. Rolling 7-day average. Some more fun data that, well, it might be fun data to create. There's a maximum up until this date for the year. So on the first day, we'd assume it would be 4.2. But bear with me now, using the tools that we've just had learned, let's try to use those. You might remember the max function from week 3. Now here I'm going to put in an array reference. F2 to F2 seems a little strange at first, but bear with me. If we make the first part of it an absolute reference, and now we drag it down, and as you can see, the second part of the array reference is moving, while the first is staying still. All the way down to 39, which is how far we've dragged it. Now let's fill it a bit quicker, holding Control, pressing down to get to the bottom, holding Shift and Control to select the blank ranges up until I hit a number, and then click Fill Down. As you can see, we got our first new maximum at 13 until we get to the 28th of January, where we got 19 millimeters, which was then surpassed 2 days later with 29.6. So let's give that a heading, max today. Let's put our units in there to make our future selves a bit happier. Hold Control and Shift, and we'll ignore this error. Now we'll move on to the next section, which is preparing your data. Now I want to quickly tell you where I source this data, and it's this website, Top End Sports, and sometimes with the Bureau of Meteorology you've got really nicely laid out data that's prepared for somebody who's going to be working with it. Here we've got something that's more for a visual representation. It's quick and easy for people's eyes to read over, but it's not so easy to use. So I've copy-pasted in the men's and women's into the CSV, and I'm going to be going over a few exercises. And first off, I'm going to be showing you how to split text and use the date function, and I'll be going over number formats. Alright, so I've got the data open in both Excel and Google Sheets, and the first thing I'm going to be doing is fixing up these dates. So there's a different way of doing splitting up text in Excel compared to Sheets, and I'm going to be showing you both of them. So, and then I'll just switch over to Excel. So once I've got the data selected, I can go up to Data, and then under Data Tools, I can hit Text to Columns. Delimited is how the way we break up the text. So we're using characters to break it up, and I've got space and comma already selected. So it will put breaks in between wherever there's a space and a comma. I hit next and then finish, and it's split up into 3 columns. The way I do that in Google Sheets is I use a function called split. I select what I'm splitting, then I specify the delimiters in between inverted commas. So in this case it'd be spaces and commas, and close that off. And I don't need to worry about the optional arguments, and I just hit enter. I'll drag that down, and I've got very similar output. Now in order to get these dates into a usable format, I need to put them together using the date function, but it requires a numeric number for the month. So the way that I'm going to convert these into numbers is with a lookup table. So first off, I'm going to make a unique list of all the months. So unique, and then I'm going to select the array and hit enter. And now I have all of these. If the month doesn't happen to be in there, that's okay, because I only want to give numbers to the ones that exist. So I'm going to do this manually. August is the 8th, May is the 5th month, January, February, March, April, May, yes, that's correct. September is the 9th, June 6th, September 9th, July 7th, August is the 8th, October is the 10th, and April is the 4th. Cool. Now with the lookup, I'm going to be using VLOOKUP, which is a vertical lookup. There are other lookups that exist, such as HLOOKUP for horizontal lookups. Also within Excel, there is XLOOKUP for when you are specifying something that isn't the first column. The other function in Sheets that works the same way as XLOOKUP is just called lookup. But for now, we're using VLOOKUP. The value we're looking up is the month, and the table that we're using is over here. Now don't forget to set this to absolute reference, otherwise when we drag this down the table will move with it, and we don't want that to happen. The column index is where the value that we're returning, so in this case it's not in the first, it's in the second column. and range lookup is an optional argument, and it specifies whether you want an approximate match or an exact match. We want an exact match, so I'm going to fill that in with false and close that off, and now that's looked it up, August, and it's returned the 8th. I'll drag this down, and as you can see, we have a number now corresponding to the month it was. Now I'll use the year function. Sorry, my mistake. I will use the date function. The first argument of the date function is the year. I'll click there, hit comma, hit the month, which is the one we just generated, and then comma, and then the day. And now I have a date, and it's actually recognized as a date format. If I go back to file, sorry, not file, home, you can see it's already a date. Compared to dates like this, it's being recognized as general, so they won't be treated as dates. I should specify also that year, month, day is the format that I've set on my computer, so my clocks and everything are set to ISO 8601. You don't need to worry about that, but it is the superior date format. Now I'll drag this down, and as you can see, it's populated. Now I'm going to show you how to make this, because if I erase any of this, suddenly we've got wrong dates. So let me undo that. I want this to be static. I want them to be values and not formulas. So I'm going to copy this, and then into the date column I'm going to paste values. So that will paste the values rather than the formulas. Now as you can see, these numbers are being treated as numbers and instead of dates. So I'll just select that, then go up to the number section and hit short date. That's correct. Alright, now I don't need any of this anymore, so I'll just delete it. The next thing that I'd like to do is, for the women's section we have the nationality split out, but for the men's we don't. So I would like to make a column that finds those. So I'll use the split function again. I'll insert a column. Sorry, not the split function. We're in Excel, so it's the text to columns. This time, my delimiter, I'm going to specify other and use a bracket, because the month always starts at the bracket. So if I split this up by brackets, I should be good. And I hit finish, and as you can see, I've got it. It does have a bracket on the end, but we can fix that with using the same function. Text to columns, delimiter, and this time I will use the other one, and it will split it into two columns. The second column will have nothing in it, but that's fine. Alright, now I've got nationality. So what I'll do is I'll copy this data set. I'll cut it, Control X, and paste it in, so that's in line. I'll also reuse this. Excellent. I'll delete this column. Cool. One last thing that I'd like to do is split up the athletes' names into first and last name. But as you can see, if I tried to split it up by spaces, the men's would work fine, but I'd have an issue when it came to the women's. Because there's multiple spaces and brackets, and I kind of only care about the first space. But in this case, I'm going to have to add a few columns. So I'll select a few and then hit insert, and it will insert a lot. Now I'll use the same text to columns function that I used before, and this time I will break it up by space. As you can see, some of them are longer. This person's the second of their name, and this person has a maiden name. Now I'd like to treat all of this as the surname, so I'm going to use a function called textJoin. Oops, not text, textJoin. Specify the delimiter. In this case, I want to put the space back in, so I'm going to set the delimiter to be a space. Ignore empty. I will ignore empty, yes. And the text that I'm going to select is these three. I'm going to select it as an array. Close that off. Surname bolt, as we'd expect. We'll drag this down. So now I've got them all as a surname. This is still a formula, so I'm going to have to copy and then paste values. Excellent. Now I no longer need these columns, so I'll select them all and delete them. Now I also want to separate these into men's and women's. Well, they are already separated, but I'd like to put them in the same table. So I'm going to say the competition and in this case I'll call this men's, and in this case I'll call it women's, and I'll just drag those down. Alright, now I no longer need these headings because we have the same data in both tables, so I'll just delete these. Excellent. Give a heading to this. Actually, I want it as one word. And now when I showed you the how to fix the dates example, I only did it with this top set. When you do it, make sure you don't forget these like I have. I've also lost the information that was attached to the date, which told me that Tim Montgomery was doped. When I did the split on the date, it came out as an extra column that looked something like this. Now I do want to keep that data, so I'm going to make a column called doped. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to be using the ISBLANK function. So if this cell is blank, I'll point to it. It will give me a true or false. If I drag that down, you'll see that for this one, it's false. Now the way I can use that is I can use the if function. So if something is true or false, then I can specify what's going to be in the cell. So I'll say that is blank again, and I will select that cell. If is blank G2, if that cell is blank, then they did not. So I'll say no in inverted commas, so it's treated as a string. And if it isn't blank, false, then they did yes. And this is completely dependent on the data. You could also specify if doped, if the string is doped or not doped, depending on what your data is. You can specify your if statement, so it doesn't need to be is blank. You can compare texts. So another way to do it would be if cell equals, and then I'll just type it in the same way that it's typed in over there, doped in brackets and in inverted commas, so it's treated as a string, and then I'll just say yes and no, so it's actually reversed this time. And if I drag that down, oops, if I drag that down, you'll see that it does come out as yes. Anyway, that data is now a formula, so I'll copy it and I'll just paste it into this column as values, so it's static. I don't need this anymore, so I will delete it. Oops, I inserted. I will delete. Alright, feels like we've learnt a lot. Now it's time to put all that into practice. You've got a few tasks to do. You've got to split up the athlete's name. You've got to fix up those dates. You've got to add a column to specify men's and women's, and add a column for doping. Pause here to complete your task, and ask your tutors for any help. Alright, hopefully you were able to put all of that into practice. Next up, just a bit more preparation stuff. Index columns, pretty handy. Named ranges, really helpful. And I'm also duplicating and protecting sheets, which is an added layer of protection and a good safe working practice. I'll hop into it. Alright, now you should have something that looks like this. The next thing that I'm going to do is insert an index column. So I'll insert a column. I'll type the heading index. And now the reason why you'd want an index column is because you might do some sorting or filtering to this data, and you'll want a way to get it back into its original state. There's a really easy way to make a sequence of numbers that, if you don't mind dragging, or you don't have a big data set, it's probably the easiest way to remember. So I've typed in 1 and 2, and then selected it, and now if I drag that down, you'll fill it in. But if your data set happens to be really long, that might not be a very fun way to do it. So I'm going to show you how to build up a function. And you can do this, it applies to really any function that you want to build. And doing it piece by piece, it's the best way. So first off, I need to know how many rows there are that are filled. There's a function that does that. It's called count A. It's actually quite a few counts. You can count based on a lot of things, but count A happens to be the one that counts all of the cells that are filled and ignores the ones that are blank. So I'm going to specify the column B to B, and that gives me 67. So now I know that there's, 67 filled in. We need to ignore the heading. So I'm going to say equals, and then point to this cell, and then say -1. And I get 66. Now the way I'm going to make a sequence is with the function called sequence. Sequence is a pretty fun function. You can specify how many rows. That's the only argument that you need to put in. But there are a few optional ones that sort of can be sort of fun. You can specify columns and make a 2D array. You can set a start point, and you can change the amount that it steps up by every time. So I could change that to 5, 10, 15, 20, and so on. We only need it for to make 66 numbers really. So I'm going to change that back. I'm going to get rid of this, and rather than typing in 66, I'm going to point it at this number. And now it's done what I need it to do. So I could copy this formula over, but let's put them all together. So this points to L7. Points to L7, and L7 contains K7 minus 1. Alright, I'll cut that out. Actually, I could probably leave it there. But I'll copy this, K7 minus 1, and I will put it inside instead of L7. Hit enter. Now I don't even need L7 because I'm actually referring to K7 now. So I get rid of that. Now for this K7, I can replace that. I'll hit escape to get out of that, and I'll copy this formula. Not the equals bit, just the formula. So I can Control C, hit escape to get out of that cell, and then replace K7 with the formula that it contained. Boom. Now I've got exactly what I need, and I don't rely on any other cells. So that's how I've made a nested formula that contains count inside sequence. So now I'll just cut that from there, and paste it over here. Now, because I want my main raw data to be all static rather than based on formulas, I'm going to copy and paste values. Cool, now they're all numbers. The next thing that I wanted to show you is called named ranges. And you can find them under the Formulas tab and just under named range, defined names on the ribbon. And what I can do is I can select the whole column and click defined name. Now it's picked A1 to A67 because that's what I've selected. It's already filled in index. Now I don't really like my ranges to have the heading in them, so I'm just going to change this reference to A2 to A67. A67. Yes, that's right. Sometimes you would want the heading to be in there. If you're using pivot tables, it makes it very handy. We're not going over pivot tables at the moment, so I'm just going to do it my way. If I didn't select the top one, then and hit define name, I wouldn't have to change that, but it would fill it in with Usain, and I actually want this to be first name, so I'll do that. And I'll just do the rest real quick. Oops. Change that to 2. I guess when I said quick, I was underestimating how long this would take. So I'll be going over the way to do this in Google Sheets next. And what this is, it's a shorthand way to make a reference. So rather than typing all of this in, H1 to H67, I now have a way that I can put this into formulas by just typing doped, for example. I'll show you how that works. Equals, and I'll say first name, it's got to type it right, first name. And as you can see, it's auto-completed. So if I hit tab, it knows what I'm talking about. I can fill it in like that. That makes it a lot easier to functions on a particular data set. For example, if I was to use unique again, I could do unique and then first names. Cool. Now I'll head over to Google Sheets. Alrighty, so here we are in Google Sheets. I'm only going to show you this once because I don't want to go through all that again, but you should do it to all the data. I'm just going to do it to one of these columns. Let's go with this one. I'll select the data that I want to be in the range. I go up to data up here, and then I go to named ranges. And now I give it a name, last name, and I can hit done, and it will reference this. Cool. If I haven't pre-selected the range, I can click add range. It will always fill it with the one that I've selected, but I can click this little square here and then select it afterwards. Cool, done, and that's nationality. Done. Alright, so we're back in Excel. The next thing I wanted to show you is sort of a safe working practice. And basically, I like this data the way it is. I'm probably going to hide this sheet, but I do want to reference it a lot. And I don't want things to change. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the sheet by going to move or copy. And I want to click create a copy. Now I have a copy of this sheet. And what I will do now is I will protect the original sheet. Actually, I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call this raw data. Oh, not raw date. Let me do that again. Raw data. Now I hit Protect Sheet, and I don't recommend using a password because unless you want to lock somebody out, it's not really that useful, and you might forget what it is. I probably would forget what it is. Anyway, the default settings are pretty good, so I'll just hit OK. Now what happens when I try to edit something? I'll get a warning, and I'll say you're not allowed to change this, even on the blank cells. And that's what I want. Now I'm free to do with this sheet whatever I'd like. I can filter it and sort it, turn it into charts, work out percentages, and I never really have to worry about losing my original data. In a way, it's a bit like Photoshop. Most of you will be familiar with Photoshop, and the safe practice in that is that you always save your original image that you're working on as a layer and don't touch it. And that way, if you screw anything up, you've always got something to go back to. The method to duplicate in Sheets is really similar. I can just go duplicate. Now I've got a copy of sheet 1. And protecting, very similar. Just go up and protect sheet. Enter a description. I don't really need one. I'll just set permissions. Restricted to only you. You can also make it so it shows you a warning. That's a little bit different. Doesn't stop you fully. But if I try to make a change now and hit enter, it'll say heads up, you're trying to change something. And you can click OK and edit it anyway. But it will give you that warning, so that's pretty good. Okay, hopefully that was all nice and clear, and you're ready to do it for yourself. So, your tasks are add an index column, make some named ranges, and duplicate and protect your sheets. And also start thinking about what are you going to do with this data. Pause here and to complete your task. Alright, now comes the time where we start making use of that data. Alright, I'm going to walk you through a few things. This is pretty loose. I'm just going to be having fun with it and showing you what you can do with those named ranges. Alright, let's jump in. Now, just quickly before I move on to the fun stuff, something I forgot to do. I'm back in raw data. I forgot that when you copy or duplicate a sheet, you will end up with multiple named ranges. So I'm just going to unlock this, go into the name manager, and just delete the ones that aren't raw data. I'll hold Control and then select them to select the ones that I want to delete. Cool, deleted. Oh, no, missed one. Oh, go back. This one. Alright, so I've got them all, right? Index, time, date, yep, first name, last name, yep, cool. There was one that I forgot to create, and that is the table array. Because sometimes you just want to reference the whole table. I'll call this one table. Cool. Now I'll lock that back up. Now let's talk about what you can do with these named ranges. So there's this thing called array formulas, which let you do a bit of maths or some sort of function on an entire array, and it just populates all at once. So I'll give you an example. Say we want the first names and last names. Oops. First names and last names, and we do want to put them back together. See, it's better to have them separated because it's much easier to just put them back together. And while we've got it separated, we can sort by either first or last. So I will show you how it works just with one cell first. And I'll use the AND. So this is how you join strings together with the AND. You can also use text join, but this way is pretty quick. And as you can see, there's no space in between because there's no space in here. So I can add a space by adding it as a string. So I'll just pop that string in there and sandwich it between two ampersands. Cool. That would work, you know, if I dragged it down, but that's no fun. Let's make it an array formula. So C1, I know this goes down to C66. And let's go D1 down to D66. Cool. I've joined all the names back together. But we don't actually need to reference these here, because we have them. That's first name and that's last name. I can actually just say first name, and then I'll get rid of this, and say last name. Boom. Easy. And then I can sort of make my own table like this, right? I can say time in seconds, that's our named range, and it's right there next to it. You know, if we wanted to shrink our table down, there's bits that we don't need. Yeah, absolutely, we can do that. It's a bit different in Sheets. I'll show you over there. Right, so over here in Sheets, I've got first name. Now if I try to just use that the same way I did in Excel, it won't work. It'll say value array could not be found. But if I wrap it in these curly brackets, I can actually make it an array and force it. And that's because if I use those curly brackets, I can just type an array into a cell. So if I was like 12, 42, 37, and then end it with commas in between, it'll put them out like that. And if I do, what's it called? A colon? No, this is a semicolon. And then hit it, it'll go down that way. And I can also make 2D arrays. So I'll put three in each of them. I think they do have to all have the same, otherwise it will cry about it. Yeah, why not 55? Now as you can see, I've got a 2D array. So it's these curly brackets that make it an array. They sort of force it in. I can do the same. So I'll do the same for last name. This time I'm going to hold Control Shift and Enter. And that automatically fills this in with array formula. See what happens when I do that. It's pretty much the same thing. So I can use sort of both methods to do it in Sheets. But yeah, you don't need those methods in Excel. So if I was to say equals first name and put the space in and last name and then hold Control Shift and press Enter, I get the same thing. Pretty cool. Now let's go over filters, which is another way to make a table. So filter is it's a very useful function. Array, I'm going to specify the whole table, and I'm going to include as a conditional, so something that you might put in an if statement. You'll see what I mean in a second. So in this case, I'm going to say I want competition to equal, and then I'm going to specify the string women's. Spelled exactly the same as I have over in that table. And as you can see, I've only got the women. Isn't that great? The dates are screwed. Anyway, fix that. It happens. Short date. Nice. Now let's try to make something with this data, right? Let's see what the difference is between each of these every time the record was broken. So the time that it previously was minus the time that it currently is the time difference. So Florence Griffith Joyner beat the original record in 1988 by 0.27 seconds. That's pretty cool. Let's see how the rest of them did. Wow. Let's not forget we can use conditional formatting. Color scales, that one will do. Oops, it's kind of backwards. So it seems like the earliest time was the best time to beat, really. 0.8 seconds. Shaved off. Nice. There's also this pretty cool thing that makes like tiny little charts. It's called Sparkline. I'm going to select this new data that I made. And then I'm going to go, where is it? Insert? Yeah, insert. Next to recommended charts, you all remember charts. We've got Sparklines. I'm going to make a line and location range. I'm going to put this little sparkline maybe here. Yeah, that'll do. Oh, cool. So it seems like it's like a tiny little line graph. Oops, that's using different data. I wanted to make this bigger. A lot of zeros. People beating the, well, yeah, I guess they're just equaling the world record, right? Sorry, I've just realized my keyboard was in the way the whole time, so you couldn't really see the values. I've put it over here now and made it a bit smaller. It's not as necessary anymore because now I'm just having fun. What if I did want this line to go in the correct direction so time moves forward as it moves to the right? Well, I could change this data, but I'm going to do it piece by piece. I'm going to get rid of this. I don't need this anymore. And I'm going to do a sort equals sort. And what am I going to pull in? Well, I'm going to pull in this table. Now, yeah, Excel will do this thing. Sheets won't do it, but Excel says, oh, you're talking about the table that was made from K1, and it puts this little hash or pound sign in, and that's to say, like, yeah, it was K1 that made this table, so that's the reference for some reason. I kind of like it. I'll get used to it. Now the sort index, that's, oops, sorry, I dropped something. The sort index is the one that we want to sort by, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, we'll sort by date, 5, 6, the sixth column. That's the date column. And we want to sort it in ascending or descending. Let's go getting bigger. Well, newer dates are higher, so I guess descending. Oops. Descending. Yeah. And by column, sort by column. Sorts the provided array by column or sort by row. I think it means sort by row. Yeah, so that means sort by row I think means it's going to swap the rows around as opposed to the columns. Let's check them both out. Oh, I haven't actually filled that in. So we'll say true, sort by column. It's actually kind of flipped it, right? So it says women's no. Yeah, it's okay, that's definitely not what we wanted. We wanted it to be false. And you can just sort of play with stuff until it works. Alright, it hasn't actually sorted, so maybe that's meant to be ascending. Yeah, that's right, isn't it? Alright, let's get these dates into date format so we can just know for sure. 1922, 1928, yep, sorted in the correct direction. Alright, let's get our... Well, now that we've done that, let's put it inside something else, right? So this is referencing K1. Let's grab this filter, copy that, and then put it inside instead of K1. Cool. Now it's just the women, right? Oh no, we were sorting that table anyway. Yeah, it makes sense. I'll cut that, and I'll put it here instead so that these point to the right column of times. Yeah, sweet. It's actually inverse now, because we're not beating the world record. Yeah, we can fix that up. It'll just be, instead of L1 minus L2, it'll be L2 minus L1. No, wait, that's what I just had. Yeah, there we go. Cool. Now it's moving in the right direction, and we got a cool little sparkline, like a little mini chart. Now the sparklines in Google Sheets are a little different. Let me pull that up. Let me move my keyboard out of the way. Yeah, sparklines, you usually do it by, let me grab some data. Let's go equals seconds. Wait, did I not call it seconds? Did I call it time? Yeah, I called it time. Alright. And to do a sparkline here, I'm not actually sure, to be honest. Data. Yep. That data. And options. What are the options? Arrange or array of optional settings and associated values to use to customize this chart. Cool, customization. Chart type, bar, max, cool. Yeah. I'm just going to do it as is. Yeah, and I've got a sparkline. Nice. Something really cool I saw made with sparklines in Google Sheets is this crazy clock made by Ben Collins. No thanks. And yeah, this is made out of sparklines. And have a look at the formula that he's used to make it. That is pretty insane, right? And that's not even the whole thing. It's got comments in it and everything. I mean, you can have a lot of fun in spreadsheets. Yeah, it's some fun that I had. I made this little guy. So the way this works, let me, so I use conditional formatting to set this to black. Let me just change that to, where's conditional formatting? Under format, of course. I'll just make this, I'll make no changes, maybe. Yeah, so basically what it does is it fills it with ones or zeros. And up here I've just got an if function. If Q5, which is this cell here, equals 1, then use this array of data, which is down here. And if it's 1, use, if it isn't 1, use this, the happy face. So let's see that in action. Put that back to black. Now change this to 1. He's sad. Yeah, anyway, now it's your turn. Have fun with your data. And I genuinely do mean have fun with your data. If you can have sort of at least, I love spreadsheets. If you can develop an appreciation for at least what spreadsheets can do for you, then you will eventually love them too. And so the last task from here until forever is to just have fun with spreadsheets. But specifically this task, keep playing with the data set, the CSV, generate at least one column, have an explore, see what functions you can find, and just don't be afraid to Google stuff. And then within that data, try to find something interesting. I've given a few examples here. Something similar to who beat the previous world record that's what I did. But yeah, there's a bunch there. And then for the last task is make something. Make whatever you want. Maybe use the filter function to feed a chart and then change what that filter does and see how the chart changes. Or do some cool conditional formatting stuff. Or maybe some sparklines. Or some pixel art. Have fun. Alright, pause here forever. Goodbye.